right. Okay, we're going to turn to three passages. We're going to be in Matthew 20, then Mark 10, and then Luke 13. And Luke 13 is where we ended last week, in verse number 21. And so before we get into the rest of Luke 13, there's a transition, somewhat of a transition that's happening. And so I want to read these verses. And I believe that this is where, as much as the order that we've been able to maintain, I know we've not really kept it, but so Matthew 20 in verse 17, we'll read this, then we'll read Mark, and then we'll read Luke. Matthew 20 and 17 says, "And Jesus, going up to Jerusalem, took the 12 disciples apart in the way and said unto them, Behold, we go up to Jerusalem, and the Son of Man shall be betrayed unto the chief priests and unto the scribes, and they shall condemn him to death. And they shall deliver him to the Gentiles to mock, and to scourge, and to crucify him. And the third day he shall rise again." All right. Turn to Mark 10, and we'll be flipping. We're going to flip back and forth, especially here at the beginning through all of these. I just want to read them all first. Verse 32. And they were in the way going up to Jerusalem, and Jesus went before them, and they were amazed, and as they followed, they were afraid. And he took again the 12 and began to tell them what things should happen unto him, saying, Behold, we go up to Jerusalem, and the Son of Man shall be delivered unto the chief priests and unto the scribes. And they shall condemn him to death, and shall deliver him to the Gentiles, and they shall mock him, and shall scourge him, and shall spit upon him, and shall kill him. And the third day he shall rise again. All right, and then turn to Luke. And we're going to actually read a couple of passages in Luke. Okay, we'll read Luke 13 first. But then I want to read one more verse that we've looked at. It's been a while. But in verse number 22, okay, it says, "And he went through the cities and villages, teaching, journeying toward Jerusalem." Okay, so I think that this is all happening all about the same time. Okay, that is my thought, my opinion on that. But to remind you, now this was several months ago, or a few months ago. Turn back to Luke chapter 9. Okay, now it is possible that Luke 9 is sort of happening around the same time as the accounts in Matthew and Mark. Okay, it may be. I may have got that off. I was trying to keep it as close as we could, but maybe not. But Luke 9 in verse 51 is where we are seeing that a transition. And he says, Luke 9:51, "And it came to pass when the time was come that he should be received up, he steadfastly set his face to go to Jerusalem." Okay, now I wanted to read that in Luke 9:51 because again, it's very possible that that Luke 9:51 is happening the same time as Matthew 20 and Mark number 10. Okay, and the reason why I say that is in Luke 9 when you read verse 54, and it says, "And when his disciples James and John saw this, Lord, wilt thou that we command fire to come down from heaven and consume them, even as Elias did?" Now, why is that significant? Okay, because in Matthew 20 and Mark 10, right after the Lord tells them what's going to happen, the mother of James and John come to him saying, "Hey, can my kids have a special place in the kingdom at your throne?" Okay, so it's very possible that James and John are like, "Hey, we'll call fire down from heaven like Elijah," and then John's mom and James's mom is like, "Lord, can my kids sit at your right and left hand in the kingdom?" It's very possible, okay, that was happening then. And if it is, then you know what? I missed that connection. All right. So, but as I'm learning in all of this as well. Okay, but in Luke 9 and verse 51, okay, and this is again opinion. I think this is probably around the last 6 months or so of Jesus' ministry, maybe a little bit less. But in Matthew 20 and in Mark chapter 10, everything else in Matthew, in Mark, and even in Luke, it's all going to the cross. It's all going to Jerusalem. And the reason why that's important, and we see it in Luke 9, 10, and 11, when Jesus Christ sends out the disciples, and those that receive you, they receive me. If they don't receive you, they're rejecting me. And then he says, if they receive you, stay. If they don't, leave. And that's all about his ministry. He's going to these towns and villages. He is sending them before him. If they receive you, then I know they'll receive me. I will stop. I will teach. I will preach, and I'll perform miracles. If they don't receive you, they're not going to receive me. I'm not going to stop and waste my time. I'm going to go to the cities and villages that do receive me. And I do think that in Luke, I know we've been preaching through Luke a lot, we come to Luke 13 in verse 22, and I think that is a continuation of what he's been doing in Luke 9, 10, 11, and 12. All of these messages on the kingdom of God, all of these sermons on, living and looking for the kingdom, being watchful, not being covetous, sending the 70 out, and all of that is all during this time that he's going to Jerusalem, right? And the reason, why is that significant? Okay, that's significant because of what we read in Matthew and in Mark about his prophecy of his death and his resurrection. Okay, it's all a part of the message that he's trying to get across. Okay, so I on the handout and outline, I'm just going to kind of run through verse 17 and maybe verse number 18 in Matthew and in Mark to kind of give some introductory comments, and then focus in on that message about his death to the disciples. All right. So in Matthew 20, verse 17, Mark chapter number 10 and verse 32, and Luke 13 and verse 22, we have the destination as Jerusalem. Okay. Although they say the same thing in these passages, they do highlight some differences. Now, in Matthew chapter number 20 and verse 17, I think that the passage that Matthew is focusing on, he's giving insight for the disciples. Okay, in Matthew, the Lord is taking the 12 disciples, and he says that he pulls them apart. All right, he takes them apart in the way. He is with them, and then he pulls these men to the side. He's calling them to walk with him alone. There's no one else around. And so I think that he's giving them insight. He's in Matthew, this whole thing is about them having insight and understanding and what is about to happen. Okay? In the Gospel of Mark, in Mark 10, in verse 32, Mark says, and they were in the way going up to Jerusalem, and Jesus went before them. And they were amazed, and as they followed, they were afraid. And it's again the 12 and began to tell them what things should happen unto him. Now, okay, so the same thing is happening, but what does Mark do? Mark focuses on the fact that the Lord is going before them. And I think that's important because I think what Mark is, he is showing us that Christ is giving them instruction. This was a very common practice with men that had disciples, a rabbi, a teacher, to walk in front of them, and as they're walking, he is teaching to them, he's talking to them, he's instructing them. Okay, he's standing in front of them, and he gives them instruction. Okay, and then in Luke, and I don't want to be like kind of nitpicking on this. I know I am. Okay, but Luke 13, I think what Luke is revealing, he is giving us the intention for the disciples. Now he says in verse 22 of Luke, and he went to the cities and villages doing what? Teaching and journeying. Oh, what is his intention? His intention is to teach, to reveal to these villages. And again, this seems to go back to Luke 9 and verse 51. The disciples have already gone ahead of the Lord. They've ministered to these cities, and they've returned to Christ. Okay, that was in Luke chapter 10, right? Now the Lord is going to these cities and villages that have received his disciples, and now he is teaching them. Okay? the intention for these disciples is to hear his words, to see his miracles, and to see the ministry that he is performing. And again, I do think that in the Gospel of Luke, that would cover Luke 9, Luke 10, 11, and 12, and 13. Okay, I do think that it encompasses all of that. And so the Gospel writers, I feel that are focusing in on a little bit different aspect, saying the same thing, but adding something to it or taking something away for their purpose. Right? The overall purpose is what? Their destination is Jerusalem. This is where they're headed. This is where they're going. Okay. Now notice the declaration of Jesus. All right. Now Matthew and Mark, and we're going to mainly and primarily be in Matthew and Mark because these are the two that are, the primary focus. All right. Luke doesn't go into all of the detail that Matthew and Mark goes into, and so. All right, let me get it pulled up. Okay. So the declaration. Now, the focus of this point is to show the response and reaction of the disciples. Okay. Their response, their reaction. Now, this is very interesting. In verse 18 of Matthew 20 and verse number 32, okay, of Mark chapter 10. Now, notice the region of their pilgrimage. Where are they headed? They're headed to Jerusalem. Now, say, well, we know this. He's already said this. Okay, now, although the message that Jesus is going to share with his disciple is not new, like I'm going to Jerusalem, he has already told them this in Matthew 16. I'm going to be betrayed. And Peter says, no, that's not going to happen. Get behind me, Satan. Okay, he's already revealed this to them. He's already told them this. So it's not new. Okay. But the change is that now they are actually headed there. Okay, we see that in Luke 9 as well. But now we are actually going here. We are headed to Jerusalem to fulfill this purpose. Okay, so if I know that if I go to Walmart, I am going to be put to death, I am going to avoid Walmart because I don't want to be put to death. Okay? But not with Christ, right? We are going here. I've already told you that I'm going to be betrayed. I'm going to be crucified. I'm put to death and come back to life. I've already told you this. But now, gentlemen, we are headed there. We are headed to Jerusalem. We are on our way. And when I get there, this is what's going to happen. Now, the region, we're going to still talk about that a little bit more in a few minutes. I just want you to see that. Now, notice the response of the pupils. Now, I'm focusing on Mark 10 on this. Now, what is their response? In Mark 10 and verse 32, Mark says this, and they were amazed, which means to stand with wonder, with awe, amazement. And as they followed, they were afraid. Okay. And he took, again, the 12 and began to tell them what things should happen unto them. Now, notice their response. Now, we're going to examine what they were told, okay? But notice this. They were both amazed and afraid. Okay, it's like, well, which one is it? Well, it's both. I am amazed by this, but I am also scared to pieces by this. All right? Now, I do believe that this is a response to what he says, right? Like, we're going to Jerusalem and I'm going to be put to death. All right? They are amazed by this. Maybe it's the knowledge of it. Maybe it's they've already heard it, but maybe it's just they're in awe of the fact that he's actually going to be put to death. What do you mean they're going to put you to death, right? Like, well, I don't know if you've already told us, but we just don't believe it. And then it sinks in and they become fearful. Okay? But I think that Mark, so I think that they're amazed and afraid for maybe a couple of reasons. And I'm going to throw both reasons out, right? Because I think both can be implied and inferred from the text. I really do. They are amazed and they are afraid because of what he is going to tell them and what he is telling them, but also the fact that he is going. They're amazed by this. You're going to be put to death, You're telling us this, and yet you're going anyway. And then this strikes fear into them. But then in verse 32, we see the revelation of the purpose. And what is that? He is going to Jerusalem to be crucified. Now we read about the fact that he's crucified in Matthew. Matthew mentions crucifixion, Mark does not. Okay. Now this revelation, I believe this, along with his resolve, or as Mark chapter number 9 in verse 51 says, his face was steadfast to go to Jerusalem. In other words, there was a certain look in the eyes of Jesus Christ that he was not going to be deterred, that something else that should have captured his attention, he completely ignored it. He was able to ignore it and zeroed in on Jerusalem in Luke 9:51. And I believe that this is amazing. It's striking his disciples in a way that they've not seen before. I think this was going on. This is why they are amazed. All right. And then even afraid. Like, oh my goodness. Well, if you're going to go, what's going on? Right. Okay. So it is possible, highly probable, that these events in Matthew and Mark, again, took place around Luke 9:51. And so I believe it's all building on this. So there's a revelation of the purpose. Okay. So we're going to Jerusalem. And so when the man asks him about covetousness, if this is happening before that, which is very possible that it is, okay, I may have gotten out of order. So when the man asks him about covetousness, and then Christ tells him about not being covetous and looking for the kingdom of God and living for the kingdom of God, there's this certain, very, very possible weight behind this now. That I'm going to be put to death. Okay, listen to these words, all right? But the destination and the declaration. All right, now notice the delivery to the Jews. So we come to verse 18 in Matthew's gospel and Mark. And so let's run through, when I say run through it, I mean, it's not deep. It's pretty straightforward. It really is, but I just wanted to go over it, all right? Now, in the passage, he is going to be delivered into the hands of the Jews and put to death, all right? So come to verse number 33. Notice the place. Verse number 33 of Mark 10. Behold, notice this, looky, looky, we go to Jerusalem. Now, what is it about Jerusalem? Well, Jerusalem is the city of David, the place of the temple, the center of Jewish worship. This was in type within the Old Testament, the place of God's dwelling. We have the temple. This is the place where God met with Israel. This was the place where God met with his people. This was the place where God desired to meet with his people. All right. Now, in Revelation, we talked about this several weeks ago, that in Revelation, we see that Jerusalem is referred to as Sodom and Gomorrah. It is referred to as Babylon. Revelation 18, it's haunted with spirits. Okay. There's evil spirits that are there. And I know this within that end time, the end time backdrop with that, the Antichrist and all that. But Jerusalem, is the city. They have rejected Christ. They've rejected their Messiah. It is God again. God calls it the city of. He calls it Egypt in Revelation, Sodom and Gomorrah. Okay, and so it is now. It is not that godly place as it once was in the days of Christ. It was the picture and the type of where God met with them. Okay, we go to Jerusalem. But then notice the person, and the Son of Man shall be delivered. Now, the Son of Man will be delivered in this place. Now, why is this significant, right? So Matthew and Mark both mentioned this. And Matthew and Mark are almost word for word on this. But the Son of Man is a messianic term. Okay, it was a term found in Daniel 7:13 that describes the man, the anointed one, the Messiah, that is going to come and deliver Israel. Now, when you read Daniel 7 in verse 13, you know that this man, this anointed one, he's more than a man. Okay, when you read Daniel 7 and we read, verse 13 and 14, he's more than a man, right? He's coming to the Ancient of Days. He's coming to God the Father, all right? There's more to him. Okay. Now, but the reason this is significant is that the Jews, these Jews, okay, the apostles, okay, the disciples, understood that the title Son of Man was a reference to the Messiah. Now, this is very troubling. Why? Because the Messiah was going to be their king. All right, the anointed one of God that came to deliver them from sin and the king was going to place them in good standing with God. This Messiah, the anointed one, the king of Israel, is going to be betrayed and put to death. All right, and so this term, Son of Man, Christ here is claiming to be the Messiah. Okay, and when we read the Messiah, or we read about that, every Old Testament reference about the Messiah, the anointed one, is applied to Jesus Christ. Okay, Psalm number 2. All right, the Messiah is referred to as the Son of God. Okay, in Psalm number 2, Isaiah 9. Was it 6 and 7? Okay, Isaiah 53. All of these references to the Messiah are applying to Christ. Okay, and this is what Christ is doing. But the person, the Son of Man, the anointed one of God, is going to be delivered. Now, notice the procedure. Now, this is very interesting. The way Christ does this. Okay, now how is this going to take place? So, in verse 33, behold, we go up to Jerusalem, and the Son of Man shall be delivered. Matthew says betrayed. Okay, Matthew chapter 20. Behold, we go to Jerusalem, and the Son of Man shall be betrayed unto the chief priests and unto the scribes, and they shall condemn him to death and shall deliver him to the Gentiles. That's Matthew. Mark doesn't mention about the betrayal. Okay, why is it? It's opinion, right? This is my opinion. Why? I think that Matthew is writing from the perspective that Christ is the king. There is messianic prophecy in the Psalms when David is betrayed, who is also king of Israel when he's betrayed, right? There's this connection. Christ is the king. He's going to be betrayed, and Matthew is focusing on him being that king, all right? But notice the procedure. Now, notice the action. Mark tells he's going to be betrayed. Matthew says, delivered. Matthew says betrayed and then delivered. Now, this is fascinating. The Lord reveals that someone will betray him. This shows that it is someone that is close to the Lord or at least knows him personally. You can't betray someone that you don't know, right? You can't go against them. You can't stab them in the back or whatever if you don't know them. Okay? He also reveals that he will be delivered to the high priest. This is also revealing. He will be betrayed and then given over to the Jewish authorities. Whoever is doing this, whoever is going to be the betrayer, is going to be very bold and is going to be very brazen. Who in the world would even think about doing this? Why would you think about doing this, right? I mean, this is to the point, and we'll get to this, but on the night that he is betrayed, none of the disciples thought it was them. They're all like, well, is it I? I mean, and Christ tells us there's going to be somebody here at the table with me. What do you mean it's going to be somebody here at the table with you? Is it me? Is it me? Is it I? And of course, Judas is scared, is like, well, Lord, is it I? He says, what you have to do, go do quickly. All right, go ahead and go take care of what you got to take care of. Okay. But the action, he's going to be betrayed and then delivered. But then notice the authorities. All right. Now the Lord will be given over to the Jewish authorities, delivered unto the chief priests and unto the scribes. Okay. The chief priests and the scribes. Now this is a reference to the Sanhedrin, which was the Jewish council. Okay, he doesn't say Sanhedrin. He doesn't say Pharisees and things, but he's going to be delivered unto the chief priests. Okay, Judas, we'll see this, is going to go to the chief priest. They're going to pay him some money, and then he'll betray them over to the chief priest. Okay, and unto the scribes. This is a reference just to the body or that Jewish authority. Okay, that will be looking at him. Now, the Lord does not reveal why he will be betrayed. But when he is, that man will take him to the Jewish council. So, what is the big deal about this? This is a big deal to Jewish people. Okay? This is not like, hey, I'm going to report you to the police. Okay? No, this is being judge, jury, and almost executioner all in one thing. We are taking you to the priests and the scribes. This is a very serious issue. All right, the Pharisees and the rulers of the synagogue, they had enough power that if you went against them, they could kick you out of the synagogue, which to them was, a big deal. They're losing eternal life, losing reputability in the community, and things like that. If the Jewish synagogue, the Jewish leaders and the Pharisees, Sadducees had that kind of power, to go to the Sanhedrin is a very serious thing. This is the high court of Israel. All right, these are the men that make decisions that affect the people in Jerusalem and in the regions about them. All right, it's not like, again, Jerusalem is the capital. Jerusalem is the center of worship. Jerusalem is the main place. And what these men are deciding is going to trickle down to the other regions. Big deal, okay? But then notice the arrangement. All right, so the Son of Man will be betrayed and delivered to the chief priests and the scribes. Notice the arrangement. What will they do? And they shall condemn him to death. They will condemn him. Now, the Lord is obviously revealing that he will stand trial. Okay, this is not maybe new. This is not something that he didn't know about or whatever. But he is standing trial. Okay. These Jewish leaders are going to condemn him to death. Now, under Jewish law, okay, there were a lot of reasons to condemn people to death under the Old Testament law. Now, by the time Christ shows up, the Jews had already completely distorted the law of God, okay, their traditions and things like that. But under Old Testament law, if you broke the Sabbath, you could be stoned. If you blasphemed God, you could be stoned and put to death. If you committed adultery, you could be put to death. Okay. If you killed somebody, you could be put to death. If there was a man that was a continual drunkard, he was still living at home, he's a continual drunkard, he's a rebellious man, he could be stoned and put to death. I mean, you could be stoned and put to death if you worship false gods and false idols. God said, put them to death. So for Christ to say that they will condemn him to death is a very serious statement. Okay? The disciples, the apostles, in order for them to do that, Christ, there's something major that he has done. Of course, we know that he didn't do anything. We know that he's innocent. Okay? They make up charges against him. We know, okay, we read the Gospels and we know that. We find this out. Okay, but this is the procedure. They're going to condemn him to death. They're going to find something, all right? But then notice the plan. So what does Mark, in Matthew says the same thing, but Mark, to deliver him to the chief priests and the scribes, they shall condemn him to death. And then what will they do? And shall deliver him to the Gentiles. Oh, that's interesting. Okay? They will turn him over to the Gentiles. Now, why? I think this is very interesting. The first thought, notice the exemption of the Jews. The Lord tells us that their plan is to turn him over to the Gentiles. Now, why is that? Because the Jews knew there was nothing they could do legally, okay, to put him to death. Okay? According to Roman law and even Jewish law, all right, they had not caught him in blasphemous words. In John, they try to say that he was blaspheming, and then Christ turns it right back around and proves that he was not blaspheming. They try to show that he had broken the Sabbath either by healing or by eating corn with unwashed hands on the Sabbath. And he turns around and shows them scripturally, nope, I haven't broken the law. I've not broken the Sabbath day at all. This is just what you think. He obviously didn't ever commit adultery. And he didn't kill anybody. He didn't do anything under Jewish law that warranted being put to death. Okay? And under Roman law, there was absolutely no way they could do that. If they did, the Roman government, well, they could, but if they did, the Roman government would come in or could come in and arrest all of them. Now, we know later on that Stephen gets stoned to death and trampled on and all of that in the book of Acts. And that was a very, very dangerous thing in which they did. It was very on the spot, very spontaneous, a very dangerous thing, because later on we read in the book of Acts that the Jews get crazy again. And he's like, one of the rulers of the city are like, guys, stop. You're going to get Rome after us. Chill out, okay? So there's nothing they can do. He had done nothing worthy of death except break their traditions. So they give him to the Romans. And then they're free, right? They're free. There's an exemption for them. They're free. Notice the execution of Christ. Now, the Jews have no power to put anyone to death, at least not in a public fashion, right? Their intention was to make an example of the Lord. In order to do that, they turned him over to the Gentiles, the Romans. Now, as I thought about this, what a slap in the face to the Jews there. Like slapping themselves. Why? They are seeking to be free from Roman tyranny, but will gladly accept their help to kill Jesus. We want to be free from you. We don't want Caesar. We don't want Herod. We don't want Pilate. We want to be set free from you. Oh, but hold on, time out. It's going to benefit us. Go right ahead. We'll turn them over to you all day long. Okay? Yeah. Very, very interesting. Now, what will they do? So it's on the thing as they will scorn him. They'll mock him. All right, we know the Gentile. We know that when he's crucified, they do that. They bow the knee, hail, King of the Jews. They make fun of him, okay? Although Jesus never said that he was a king. I mean, he said he had a kingdom, which implies he is a king, but he says but it's not of this world. I've got a kingdom, but it's not of this world, okay? It's out of this world. It's somewhere else, okay? There's a spiritual aspect to that, but like the kingdom of the angelic beings, right? He could have called 12 legions, he said, to deliver him. Would have been absolutely no problem for him. But they scorn him, they mock him. And then they'll scourge him. Verse 34, and shall scourge him. That would be whip him with that cat of nine tails, the leather whip. They'll scourge him and they'll beat him. And then they will, in which a lot of men, died as a very horrific thing. Okay, they will spit on him. Now, this is a major, major disgrace, right? This was a sign of complete and total disdain and hatred. This was a very embarrassing, cruel thing to do. And especially for a Roman who is a Gentile dog in the eyes of the Jew to spit on another Jew. Now, this is how serious this is. The Jewish people are willing at this time. These Pharisees, they hate Christ so much, they are willing to turn him over to the Roman authorities for no reason other than for envy. They don't like him. They got to shut him up because he's going against what they're teaching. People are following him, and they turn him over to Roman society, all right, for a Roman, a Gentile to do this. All right, this was a very serious thing, all right, to the Jews. And then to tell his disciples, his apostles, they're going to spit on me. All right, they're going to spit on the Son of Man. What? You kidding? Christ had to come and tell the Jewish, this is the disdain that the Jews had for the Romans. Under Roman law, the Romans could compel a Jew to carry a Roman soldier to compel him carry his equipment for a mile. Christ on the Sermon on the Mount says, you know what, carry it too. When the Roman Show the Gentiles, show the Roman what love is and what being a child of God is all about. Take it another mile. Why? Why do you tell them? Because the Jews, man, they hated him, and yet they're turning him over. Now, Mark doesn't tell us this. Mark does tell us, but Matthew tells us they will slay him or they will crucify him. All right, Matthew uses the word, and they shall deliver the Gentiles to mock, scourge, and to crucify. Matthew doesn't mention the spitting, but he does mention the way of death, which is crucifixion. Mark does not. Mark just says he's going to be turned over, he's going to be killed. So in Mark, Mark doesn't focus on that. He just focuses on the fact that he's being killed. But Matthew is focusing on the fact that he's going to be crucified. Okay? They will put to death by the Romans at the request of the Jews in the form of crucifixion. Okay? We'll say, what? He'll be crucified? Are you kidding? A very horrible death, a very horrible thing. All right? And we know, all right, from our studying in Galatians, we know for Christ to be hung on the cross and to hang from a tree was to show a sign of a curse, like a curse from that he was cursed. Well, not cursed by God like an anathema, because Paul says you don't do that. You can't say that Christ is accursed by the Spirit. Okay, that's blasphemous things. But that he died as a man under a curse from God, like he was hanging on the tree, and he died the death of a criminal. It appears that he is being cursed by God. That was sort of the point. And of course, we know he wasn't cursed by God, but he was under a curse, right? Like Paul does say that he was cursed. So, and there's, I'll play on words, but to curse someone is not the same thing as this man's hanging on the tree, and he is seen as that curse to fulfill the curse for us. There's some differences there. But when Christ tells them to be crucified, you're going to be cursed? You're going to come under a curse? What? Very big deal, okay? And then the promise. But then he gives a promise. And the third day he shall rise again. Now the Lord gives his men some encouraging words. And these words should have stayed with them, but for some reason they forget. All right, Mary is the only one, Mary, who anointed the feet of Christ, is the only one that got it. He's going to come back from the dead. It's all good. Okay? But they forgot. He will rise on the third day. Now, of course, it is easy for us to judge them. All right? It's easy for me to judge them and say they should have embraced these words and rested in them. But I thought about it myself personally. How often do I read the promises of God and then I forget them under my stress and under my strain, right? The Lord is revealing much to these men. He is telling them what will happen. We're going to Jerusalem. I'm going to be betrayed and delivered. The chief priests are going to give me over to the Gentiles and condemn me to death. And the Gentiles will mock me. They will spit on me. They will scourge me. And ultimately they are going to crucify me. And I will rise again the third day. Now this promise would have been very difficult for them to understand. Now why? What does it mean that he's going to rise again? Okay? Resurrection was something that the Jews believed in, but they did not believe that it was going to happen until the end of the age. Now they could come away with this. He shall rise again. Okay, he's going to come back again. I mean, okay, maybe they should have grasped that. Maybe they should have seen that. Yeah, sure. But in their mind's eye, even in John 11, when we get there, when Christ says, do you believe that your brother will live? And he's like, yeah, I know he's going to live again at the last day. There's going to be a resurrection. No, do you believe that he can live today, now? I am the resurrection and the life, right? And so, they're hearing this, but they're not hearing it, right? Christ is laying this out for them. Now, what is going to happen in Mark 10, Matthew 20, and then we've already been studying Luke 9 and forward, but even in Luke 13 and forward after this. Every event, in all of the events that come after these words, should be studied and examined through the lenses of this coming crucifixion. The idea of the kingdom of God, the idea even here when we get to, and it's so interesting to me, um, when we get to Mark 10 and Matthew, and then over in Luke, but right after this, or a very short time after this, Matthew seems to suggest that it was right after, or very close after he makes this statement. Then came to him the mother of Zebedee's children, James and John. We're going to Jerusalem. I'm going to be betrayed. I'm going to be treated like a criminal. I'm going to be treated horribly at the hands of the Romans, the Gentiles. And I love the fact that Matthew, Mark called them Gentiles. I mean, to stress this. And I'm going to rise again. Is that so, Lord? I don't know. This is a little. I'm amazed and afraid. Oh, hey, by the way, Jesus, can my kid sit next to you in the temple or in the kingdom? It's kind of like, wow, what a great time to be asking this question right after I'm telling you these horrible events that are about to transpire. It shows you where their thoughts were, right? Which was still on a kingdom. It's still on a kingdom. Why? Because there is a kingdom promise to Israel, and that kingdom is going to be fulfilled, and it will be brought to pass. It has not happened, and it's not here yet, but it will happen. Which ties in with Luke 13, more stuff about the kingdom of God. But anyway, that's a very simple passage. He's breaking it down a little bit, but this is a transitional, one of those somewhat transitional points where Christ's ministry is, again, shifting. He's still to the Jewish people, but now this ministry is to Jerusalem. He's pointing his disciples to this, and everything that we study after this is going to be kind of within the light of this. And so when we talk about some of these things, I'm going to make reference back to this message to his disciples, understanding, what's going on, what is going on with them on that. All right. So I hope that you understand the passage a little bit more. Again, it's fairly simple, or maybe just brought out something not thought about before on this. But we will pray and be finished this evening. And let's go to the Lord in a word of prayer.